Welcome to the latest episode of Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app on Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, and on Android. We ask you to use Spotify. Also, check out the Five Reasons YouTube channel for everything in South Florida sports, and subscribe to Off the Floor. In our Discord, you get 10 different channels in addition to host updates. There's stuff on Twitter the past few days we've had on Off the Floor for weeks, so check it out. Again, it's Off the Floor. Link right here in the description. Bypass the Apple upcharge and get in, and you can cancel at any time. Also, Prize Picks, use the code 5FIVE, put down your $5, get $50 to play right away. Prize Picks is the official fantasy sponsor of the Five Reasons Sports Network, legal in the state of Florida. And even with some of the sports dormant right now, there's plenty to play. WNBA, MLB, and more. Check it out. It's prizepicks.com. And now, today's episode.
Mercy. Luxurious. Heat Nation. Yeah. Mercy and Lago. Down to Biscayne.
Yikes. Five on the floor. Ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing. You can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars. Wearing bubble frogs.
Down to Biscayne.
Kept the floor playing. Got it all band. Y'all seen the block. Stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's power have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the Five Reasons Sports Network. Also make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
All right, welcome back to Five on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. Do we dare say ribbit? Do we dare say ribbit, Brady? Are we at that point? No, I'm not going to say ribbit. I already said ribbit. Miami Heat look like they're bringing back most of their core roster from last year. Duncan Robinson out. Simone Fontecchio is in. Davion Mitchell's been re-signed. Of course, there were changes made at midseason, so it's not exactly the same roster that's going to training camp, and there could still be more changes. I know that they're still trying to move Terry Rozier, and Andrew Wiggins' name is out there. But as of right now, the change that Pat Riley spoke about at the press conference hasn't really materialized for a variety of reasons. And instead, there was a story written by the great Barry Jackson. I must use the words the great. It's kind of like he's a knight of the Miami Herald. And he went through the Heat's plan, some of which we've kind of telegraphed here as well, and where they stand with things. But there were some passages that jumped out to people from the story. And again, he's not quoting anybody specifically. And again, you can follow Brady at Brady Hawk 305. He's with me here today. He's not quoting anybody specifically, but he's getting background information to give sort of an idea of direction. And there were other things about Wiggins and other players in here. But this was one passage that got played out the most because it was similar to what some Heat fans predicted, like way back in March, like almost word for word, and that it would come from a story written by Barry and the Miami Herald. The Heat believes it cannot accurately judge last season's post-Butler roster because of the chaos that Butler created, a change in roles for different players, Andrew Wiggins' ankle injury, and other factors. I'm going to give you my reaction to that, but I want to get your reaction to it first. And then what we're going to do in this episode is start a series about what this roster actually can provide at this moment. This is not about long-term direction, which, again, I've said go young. So I don't have a problem with that as a course of action as long as it's followed through with. But we're just going to talk about this current roster because that quote makes it sound like it's not just a direction into the future thing, but it's a we believe we can compete with what we have thing. And that's where we're going to start to explore this over the next couple of episodes. At least compete, not contend for championship, but at least compete. What do you make of that statement?
I would say it's expected. I mean, that's kind of what we would have predicted in general. It's kind of what we've heard over the last few years. It's the only thing, my main reaction to it is I thought we were going to kind of leave that narrative last year because we heard so much of that last year. The last year was such a distraction that it was just, there was so much going on around the team trying to figure out obviously the Jimmy situation. And as much as you could say of what happened last year, kind of later into the season and everything, you can kind of understand it. You could kind of understand with what they were dealing with, the just trying to rebuild into a certain year and trying to fit all these pieces in on the fly. With that said, I'd rather kind of leave that in the past. I mean, the Jimmy thing is in the past. This is a new version of this team. We've kind of talked about this being a bridge to what's coming, to maybe a youthful team that we could hope for them if they can make, get some of these older guys, turn them into younger pieces. They fully lean into this, but I say that meaning you just don't want to hear that part of it. I think this year, this is kind of the year where the thing is the team knows, I think, where they are. Like, this isn't one of those things where like you kind of like the team is always going to try to prep up the team and try to like push them up in a direction. Because you want to build confidence in the team. You still want them to have a direction of competing. That's always going to be the level of this team. But I do think this team kind of knows where they are. I think they know that they're leaning into this direction of youth, that they're going to have to play. Like you said, this isn't a contending team going into next year. This isn't a roster that you're saying is going to go win the East. But the reason why the comment makes even more sense is because I think we've seen them say this stuff when the East was better, much better than it is coming into next season. And they've made that case with certain rosters. But this is kind of a different situation because it's a different kind of team. But yes, the East is wide open. But I do still think if you are trying to lean into the now and you have that mindset, there are certain moves to make to improve the roster. So I know this episode specifically, we were going to talk about one piece of this that dramatically needs to improve if they do want to compete, at least at all. I mean, get out of the play-in range, because it does feel like even as like I know a lot of people are talking about how bad the Heat may be with this roster. We keep making it clear, like their bottom, like their floor is very high still based on the Eastern Conference and where it sits. So like their floor is still where they've been the last few years, even with Jimmy. Like they've fallen into that play-in range, and that's kind of where their floor is going to be this season as well. And that's not a good thing. That's why they keep ending up in the situation of being in the middle in these drafts and in the standings.
Yeah, and the top end of the East is, they've all taken a hit. Boston, Indiana, New York has not, but they're going to be breaking in a new coach. We'll see what else happens there. Well, not a new coach. Mike Brown's been around, but a new coach for them. And, Milwaukee, obviously in transition here. Dame's gone. We knew he wasn't going to play next season anyway. Halliburton out for Indiana. So, yeah, the East, the top of it has come back down. Detroit and Orlando are teams that look like they may be on the rise and are making moves to try to get up higher. I don't think some of the teams at the bottom are going to be as bad as they were. I think Washington at least has a direction now. Charlotte, I never trust them. There's talent on that roster, but I feel like they need to move LaMelo before they ever actually realize any of it. And Atlanta, I think, has pretty clearly passed Miami, unless Miami's young players really pop this year. But let me just comment on this statement, and then we'll get to this. And we're going to do more of these episodes. We're actually going to have Brendan Tobin on. We're going to do like a bunch of State of the Heat episodes starting next week. But this particular paragraph, I understand why it irritated fans. I get it. Okay. Because, again, the rest of the stuff about leaning young, if Spoelstra's going to play the young guys, clearing out progress stoppers, I've said all that. Okay. And I get it. Like this direction of, kind of building the best possible roster you can, not going outside of your value spaces, not getting rid of all of your vehicles financially because of aprons and all that. I've defended them on that. And then it's okay, wait for a star to get pounce on a star. But of course, now the 2026 class is drying up, which, by the way, Alex on our pod predicted a long time ago. And so it's hard to get stars right now. It just is. Okay. It's not the same as before. Clear cap space and just make it happen. But this particular paragraph, I think to fans, it comes off as a bit of a cop out and a little bit delusional, because we watched this team at the end of last year, and nobody criticized Jimmy more than I did for, in any of these spaces, for the way he behaved and the way it affected the team and everything that Spoelstra, Bam, everybody else had to deal with. But we also saw this team against Cleveland lose by 92 points in the last two games. And that's why it's kind of like, okay, if you see that and just think, well, Wiggins' ankle being healthy, changing roles, the problem is, like, you haven't gotten the star to allow players to fit into their natural roles. So I don't know that the role, like, we're going to have any more role definition this season necessarily, because this is a season to me that you're experimenting with young players and putting them in different positions. Although I keep saying Jovic, I want him to get in a consistent position. So I guess the way the paragraph was written, I get why, and it's not, Barry's just giving background that he's getting, but I think that's why it rubbed people the wrong way, because it just, we watched it with our own It doesn't mean that the players can't get better. It doesn't mean that, direction wise, this doesn't make sense. But this roster is constituted. This is not a top 8 team in the East, and this is a weak conference. And the single biggest reason it's not a top 8 team in the East is because of what we're going to talk about on the other side of this. So let's get to it. But I wanted to introduce at least this particular paragraph. There are other parts of Barry's story that I totally understand, agree with, get. This particular paragraph, I get why it was a little bit controversial in the social media space. All right, before we get there, this is not controversial. If you're looking to buy or sell a house, it's Real Estate Shop. Check them out at realestateshopfl.com. That's 2 P's and an E. Realestateshopfl.com. The Fort Lauderdale Realtor on Instagram. Amanda, Javier, they'll do a great job telling you exactly what your house is worth if you're selling, making sure that people get there for the open houses. They're all over South Florida. Or if you're looking to buy a house for your family, they've got a family themselves. They live here in South Florida. They know the market, and they'll help you through the entire process. So check them out. It's realestateshopfl.com or the Fort Lauderdale Realtor on Instagram. Okay, the single biggest problem with this current roster, because this is worse than it was when the season ended last year, because at least when the season ended last year, they had 2 specialists on the team in Duncan Robinson, arguably the best shooting specialist they've ever had, and Alec Burks, who they started late in the season, right? Because, out of necessity to a certain degree, but he was playing as a starter. They don't have either of those guys now, and it doesn't appear that they're going to be able to bring Burks back, at least with the way things are set up right now. Is this going to be a horrible shooting team? Because other than Tyler Hero, I don't see a guy who on high volume is going to hit a lot of shots from deep. Highsmith, Jovic, yes, they're capable, but these are not guys that teams are going to worry about once they get the ball behind the arc.
Yeah, it's another conversation we're having offensively about this team where it's more pressure on Tyler instead of helping him offensively. The one thing that could help him is if they play Kasparis, a lot more, and they have a playmaking point guard, and he works out this year. And it's not like he's going to pop on the scene to a degree, in his rookie season, but at least just handling the ball, maybe letting Tyler play the off-ball role that we talked about, like that's great. But I'm not when I talk about the needing shooting on this team, I'm not accounting for Tyler. Tyler's going to be Tyler. Tyler's going to shoot a high percentage. He's going to get a lot of shots up. That's a given at this point. It's everything else. Is Davion Mitchell going to shoot 47% from 3, over a decent stretch of the season? Probably not. That's probably not going to happen. Right. I think Bam was shooting above 43% post All-Star break from 3. We'll see what that becomes. But obviously, if the front court begins to shoot a little better, that could help as well. But it's a lot of ifs I'm throwing around right now. Jaime Jaquez, we could see what his shot's going to become. I know that's been the focus this whole offseason, is if he could shoot better. Nikola Jovic, we'll see what that looks like. I think, my opinion, when we talk about defining roles on this team, my number one thing is I think Nikola Jovic needs to have the ball in his hands. He needs to be utilized more as an on-ball player. If you're leaning young, you have to lean into their play styles. And that's the way to do it with him. It's not putting him in the corner and letting him spot up shoot. But if he could shoot at a decent clip, that helps as well. But like I said, I'm throwing a lot of ifs around. And here's my biggest thing, because I've been saying all offseason that this team needs shooting. And they did just go and get a shooter for Duncan Robinson. They got Fontecchio. They have somebody in the fold that they could throw in there, and he is a good spot of shooter. A year ago, he shot
31% overall, though. That's the thing, right? From 3.
Yes, he just didn't get a lot of reps last season. He didn't have a good season. If he's not getting a lot of playing time on Detroit, that makes you think what situation could be here. But Miami's always been able to kind of put guys in the right role, and if it's just go shoot the ball, he can find a role here. With that said, with the direction of this team that we know it as being, I don't want to see him playing over the young guys. I don't want to see him Nikola Jovic and Khalil Ware. I want those guys finishing games, closing games. If this is the year it's going to be, Jaime Jaquez, if he's still on the roster, he needs to be playing. He needs to be getting a decent amount of minutes to see what you have with him. Sitting him for Fontecchio for a good portion of the regular season, you're not getting anywhere. You're not figuring anything out. That's not fixing anything. Fontecchio is probably not going to be here in a year. That's just the way this is going to be. So you have to lean into this. So as much as I say that they needed shooting, and I'm all for adding that type of depth, especially if you're losing Burks, it's not a bad piece to add to the roster. But my first thought when I saw that was I don't want this to be a situation where they start playing them, these type of guys, these older guys over the young pieces. I want the rookie to play. I honestly, another player that I think about, I want Pella to play. I want Pella to play over a vet, a guy like Fontecchio. You just want we keep saying leaning young. This is becoming the phrase of the offseason. We have a lot of, I feel like every offseason there's We're leaning offense was like the big thing, a few off seasons in a row. Now they're leaning young. But my thing on saying they're leaning young, when I say it, I just mean like Spo and the coaching staff and the rotation needs to lean young. I just want to see the young guys out on the court. Forget leaning it as a full on roster or cap space, all of that stuff. And look, if Wiggins is on the roster, he's going to play. Like Wiggins is still a player that could be in the mix. There's certain guys that I'm fine with if they're a veteran and playing in the mix, but it's more so the guys on the back end of the rotation. Yeah. And like I said, I just think, yes, winning games matters. They're always going to lean defense. Davion's going to play a ton. But with all that said, I want to see Khalil and Nico and a lot of these guys figure it out. Like, just go play them at the end of the game. Let's see what they have. Let them get those reps in. Like, this is kind of the time for it. So I just want to see that portion of it. But I know I didn't mention the shooting a lot there because I was talking about the youth, but it ties into it because they need to let the young guys figure it out shooting-wise.
But Brady, it is about the shooting to this degree because if we're going to lean into the young guys, they need space around them to be able to operate. And I just think that's going to be really challenging in this offense. But also it kind of speaks to the fact that they have young guys, but they don't have a guy who's a premium shooter in their core of young players that they're developing, right? So I like a lot of what they've got. Ware is a vertical spacer, the athleticism, the shot blocking, and all that, right? Larson, I like his grit, his toughness, his ability to draw contact. But we knew this thing he had to work on when he came in was the shot. Jaquez, you don't want him standing in the corner shooting threes because he's going to be left open. And last year he missed a lot of them. And, this is, again, where his growth has to come, but it's beyond that. He's got to figure out other ways to create and finish when teams are taking away what he did for most of his rookie season. So we're talking about all these guys, but they don't have – there's no Duncan here, right? And I know it's hard to replicate a Duncan. We just call him the second best undirected player in their history. But there's no guy in this mix that – I mean, of all of these young players, Jovic is probably the best shooter, right? But neither you nor I want him in a role where that's going to be what they try to maximize. He's not a shooting specialist. You're not running him around screens. He's done the spot up stuff in certain lineups, and he's been pretty decent at it. But like you said, that's not where he's best. So I'm just wondering which of these guys is going to be a plus shooter. I mean, we're talking Larson, Jaquez. I mean, Haywood's done a great job just getting to a par level as a three-point shooter, right? Because I don't think any of us expected him to be that. And I don't even consider him part of the young core anymore. He's kind of like a mid-career veteran at this stage. And in the last year of his contract also. So he may not be here, but beyond this season. But that's my thing is I want them to lean young, but they may end up being one of the 5 worst shooting teams in the entire league doing it. So we got to prepare for that, right? Or they got to – like this is why the Wiggins for Dalton Neck conversation, which has been a media thing that's been out there mostly from the LA side, like I kind of get why that would make sense from the Heat side and maybe why you would want to keep Dalton Connect because he showed some things as a shooter as a rookie. Of course, he was traded once, sent back. But that would give you a young player who's one of his primary skills is shooting, okay? Mm-hmm. And they don't have that right now. So like that, I'm like, okay, if you can get that piece, like – all right, like that's a guy who could probably be a core rotation player for you going forward and do some of the things, not all the things that Duncan did. I mean, that's where I'm at with it. Lean young, but I think we have to be prepared for the fact that this team is going to have they're going to have some 11 for 39 nights from 3, a lot of them, I think.
And with that said, the question becomes another part of this is if that is the case and you see that coming into the season, maybe the goal is to lean a little bit more OKC than Boston. Maybe it's you lean into the inside game, you lean into the mid-range game, you lean into that stuff instead of getting up 45 threes and you're not making many of them. Maybe you quickly adjust that. Just have that in your back pocket that you have the ability to kind of let these guys loose. We'll see which way they lean there. I know I don't have a lot of confidence in that happening, at least early in the season. I still think they're going to get them up. The goal is, number one, you see the growth that we're talking about. And number 2, you have guys like maybe it's not Davion, maybe it's somebody else, but you have somebody just shoot above their head. It happens all the time. Like if a guy gets hot and they just kind of shoot at a high level early in the season, they get a little confidence, they're in a rhythm. That helps as well. But the reason why you mentioned, like, I'm thinking about it like Jovic, we talked about on the ball, Kasparis, we talked about on the ball. Mm-hmm. You have the bigs who are kind of going to be playing next to each other a ton. It's like the roles that we like, if we were defining each individual player's role that we want them in, the best possible thing is to have shooters around those individual things, if that makes sense. And they just don't have that. So it makes it even tougher for these guys to put them in those roles when you don't have that. And you're not, as much as we're going to say Tyler off the ball, that's only going to last a certain amount of time. Like you're
because they don't have enough other guys to be. They don't have enough other guys to be on it.
Happened
That's the
every.
thing.
I mean,
So
every game.
it's going to default to him.
And if it happened every game, if they put him off the ball early in the game, by the third quarter, fourth quarter, he was not getting any open spot up looks. And that's what they're going to do even quicker this season, especially if it's the same rosters. I think there's just quicker adjustments to that. And Tyler has to be forced to kind of play the pick and roll thing, lean into the floater, the getting to the rim stuff, getting to the free throw line. He's still going to get a bunch of threes up, but that's not what's going to open up the game. Like, you have to have somebody at least that number one teams help off of, and you make them pay. But also, like, Duncan just he forced a lot. Yeah, look, there was points later in the season where he wasn't getting a ton of minutes. Like, he was the guy off the bench that was forcing some things, but he wasn't like, he wasn't closing games or doing anything like that. But there was portions of the game when Tyler was out of the game where he's moving a defense. And the question is, do you have a guy on the roster when Tyler hits the bench this season that can move a defense? And it doesn't have to be from the three. It could be from anywhere. You have to have somebody that's either every time they touch the ball is either drawing a double on that baseline. We'll see. I think Bam is going to see that by default. Like, once again, by default, that's what's going to see. Bam's going to see a ton of attention in that range. But yeah, that's just my overall question on shooting. And I'll say this as well, because you're talking about how Duncan came up, how Max came up. They didn't come up based on draft picks. They came up based on the two-way system. And I'm looking at the kind of the lower end of this roster, and there's not really that specialist guy that they have down there right now. And I'm even looking at the Summer League roster. I don't really see a specialist guy that could kind of break out here. There could be a guy that breaks out shooting, but I just don't see it as like a shooting specialist. That part of me wonders, like, if you had to give like one hot take, I kind of see the last two-way going outside of this current roster that we're looking at right now. I think it's going to come from somewhere else where they've done it before. I mean, maybe they did it with Cole Swider. I mean, but I think it's going to come where they do a little scouting from other teams in Summer League, or maybe there's somebody that just from outside the system that they see. But I think it's going to be a priority. They kind of have to. That's what they've had such success with. They could find specialists that way without having to kind of use a draft pick on it. So I'm just curious to see if maybe they can find a gem that way, because the scouting department's been so successful at it.
Yeah, and you take a look at the undrafteds that they brought in, and we talked about them. And Adele and I did a podcast on them that are on their Summer League team. The three guys that they brought in, and like one of them on a two-way. You're talking about one traditional big, one big and settle third who can shoot, and then there was more of a wing type, right? So like there is no guy like that like you said, in the pipeline. And I think they need to find one. They do, or someone early in their career. Like, that's why the Connect thing is interesting to me for that reason, because this group needs, a shooting, someone who that's just what they do.
Shooting wing specifically. Like, that's the position. Yeah. Like, we keep saying they have the big room kind of figured out right now. Like, they've gotten some guys down the line. The point guard situation,
and the point guard room is much better.
It's just the wings. They have a lot of wings, honestly, too. I mean, you look down the line, we talk about Wiggins, Pella, Jaime, Haywood. They have guys, but they're not defining guys that fit the roster, where a couple of those guys aren't going to be in the rotation. There's a need for a consolidation in the wing room, to be honest, and they need it to turn into a shoot.
I'm with you. I think that's a good place to close it. I mean, we'll do more of these episodes as we go forward, taking a look at what they look like defensively. We're not saying that the roster is complete before training camp, because I do think they're still looking, to move a couple of these guys and sort of reshuffle some pieces while still trying to avoid the repeater and all the other things that play into it. But they're going to need something to break with another team for that to happen. And as of now, we don't have it. So we're looking at a roster that, again, looks reasonably the same, with Fontecchio replacing Duncan. And look, if Fontecchio shoots against the Heat like he shoots against everybody else the way he shot against the Heat, then sure. I think we were on press row one of the games he played against them, and I think I said to you or to Alex, I said, he'll be on the Heat next year, because this is what they do. They go sign the guy who kills them. And I understand, again, why they did this, because if you're going to part ways with Duncan, you've got a smaller salary here, and if you either keep Fontecchio or you waive and stretch him, again, you're getting a little bit additional flexibility there. So I get it. He's a little bit younger than Duncan, and it just seemed like things had run their course with Duncan. So all of that is understood, but I'm with you in this regard. If Fontecchio and Kyle Anderson are playing a lot of minutes this year, don't even get me started on Rozier. But like, if those two guys are playing a lot of minutes this year, even though they're good players in their own right, that's not advancing the cause. But advancing the cause also means we're going to have some nights that are really hard to watch, where there's going to be a lot of clanking. And I just they got to find a shooter in this group somewhere to add to this group. I think that's absolutely key. Even if you want to lean in the mid range, we know how the game is played these days. All right, Brady, appreciate it. We'll do more of these episodes going forward. I mentioned Brendan Tobin's going to join us next week. I got a couple of other special guests planned. Summer League coverage beginning this weekend. Guys are going to be on playback, watching some of these games, playback.tv/5RSN. I'm actually going to be out at Summer League from the 11th through the 15th. My first time in Vegas in 6 years, 4 nights. That's all I can take out there. All right, Brady, appreciate it. And we'll do more episodes over the weekend. Have a good one, everybody.